thank you for coming here today, and I want to thank the selectmen and the members of the broadband groups that represent many of the towns. I want to represent the general public for being here. I want to thank the general public. We also have representatives from some of the companies that responded to our private provider RFP. And I guess to begin with, let me just introduce myself. I'm Peter Larkin. I'm the Mass Broadband Institute's chair of the board. I'm also a special advisor to Secretary Ash. And I have here on my left Bill Ennin, who's a community liaison for the Mass Broadband Institute and also represents the Secretary Ash office as well. We have Ed Donnelly, who's going to come in here. He's a deputy director of the MBI, and he will be here shortly, but we thought in deference to you that we'd start this hearing right away. I wanted to make mention that we also have representatives from the companies that responded to the private provider RFP. We have representatives from Crocker Communications. We have representatives from Westfield Gas and Electric. We also have Comcast located in the back of the room, as well as Charter. I believe we might have Fiber Connect here as well. We do. We have a hand up. Fiber Connect is here as well. We're going to have reasons to have breaks and ask questions directly to the individuals involved, so it's really important that we do this. Just so you know that this meeting was put together to solicit feedback from Select Board and representatives of the MBI the MBI town designees to broadband, and it all has to do with the last mile program grants to provide broadband service to unserved towns in Western Mass, and it's specifically directed at the private provider RFP. Give you a little background, and this is just one of the initiatives that we're doing at Mass Broadband. And it was a recognition that when we went into negotiations with the cable providers, with the cable extension communities, that there was an interest to look at other communities as well. We also had Time Warner was acquired by Charter. They did some activities with some of our unserved communities in Hinsdale and in West Stockbridge and in Lanesboro. And it offered us an opportunity to put together a private provider RFP that we're responding to today. This is not a hearing on the last mile program in total. It's specifically to get feedback as it relates to the private provider response that we had. We received the 6 grants. Of course, the companies are here present, and it's an opportunity to hear your impressions, thoughts, considerations, and recommendations in that regard. It's not a time to make a final decision from the town's perspective. That can come later. And all the questions received during today's hearings will be cataloged and responded to in writing no later than March 2nd. Remember, as we said earlier, when we posted the RFP, or the responses to it, the submissions of a grant application in response to this RFP does not automatically qualify a provider to receive a grant from MBI. And the posting of each grant application to the website does not indicate that the applicant is eligible to receive state funding or participate in the last mile program. So just wanted you to know that for the purposes of this hearing. We have received reservations to speak from town representatives for specific times. We're trying to allow for the time of your busy schedules as well. We've asked each representative of town to limit their testimonies to no more than 8 to 3 minutes. We have reservations already posted. We'll try to let you be aware of that. It's more important that we've asked you to provide written testimony. That's very helpful, but we're more interested in what your personal feelings and thoughts are, how it impacts you. We want to really sort of get a real texture of its importance. Any select board member or broadband delegate that had not RSVP, they should check with Christine on the side to mention. If there's any members from the general public who want to submit feedback, they can also send that testimony to Ed Donnelly, who's going to be here. I think he's coming in. And we have posted his website. We have his email address as well. So we have representatives from the 6 responding organizations. We're going to have breaks in this as well. And in deference to everyone that's here, we're going to obviously move you through in a way that's helpful to everyone whose time is very valuable. So again, I just wanted to give you that overview of what we're trying to do. Just know that we're going to review all questions we received today and respond accordingly. And again, we're moving through this process to qualify respondents as well. And once the process is complete, we'll correspond directly with each of your towns regarding the outcomes of the process, and we'll post information on our website. So anyways, again, so just to suffice, I want to thank you for your attendance, and what I'd like to do at this point in time is move to the first person who's on the list. And Christine, would you like to?
Charlotte?
You're in, Bob. You're going to lead the way.
All right. I am Bob Hansaker, Charlemont Broadband Committee, and I will try to be on time. Will you let me know in 3 minutes? Is that?
We have a timer, but it's for convenience.
All right. So you said you wanted to know how we really feel about things, and that's actually what I opened with, right? The town of Charlemont.
Excuse me, about the Private Provider RFP. Just so you know.
All right. So the town of Charlemont has a desperate need for broadband, right? We need it for economic development. We need it to support our local businesses. We need it for our real estate market. We need it for our children, right? We need our children to be doing their homework at home, not in the library parking lot and not at school. But moreover, we need it today, right? Charlemont is struggling demographically, as are many of our towns, and we're digging ourselves deeper and deeper into an economic hole every day we don't have broadband, a hole that's harder and harder to climb out of, right? So this is a desperate need we have in our town, which I think we share with most of the other towns. We were hopeful in Charlemont that the provider RFP would give us some new options. Maybe Comcast or Charter or a large telco would respond. That didn't happen. We did get 2 responses from local companies, and one of those in particular we found particularly attractive, and that was Westfield Gas and Electric, that proposed this a la carte menu of services that go all the way from design and engineering to construction project management, all the way into network operation, right? And we found this to be a very interesting proposal, and we think it could potentially be kind of a game changer for our town. So we went through the sustainability process, and as MBI knows, those numbers came out kind of challenging for Charlemont. Really, the Leverett model is tremendously expensive for Charlemont, and that's kind of our sustainability worksheet of record. Based on the WG&E proposal response, we prepared a new sustainability worksheet, which we've shared with MBI, and the numbers come out much better. We look like we can get down to an operating model where our per subscriber cost is down around $90 a month or so, which is much, much better than what we were looking at before under the Leverett model. But operation is only one part of it, right? That absolutely has to work. It's critical. But the other critical part is we have to be able to afford the construction. And as you know, because we've shared this with MBI, we have a special situation in Charlemont, right? When we did our borrowing authorization for the $1.7 million for our not to exceed budget of $2.67 million, that not to exceed budget, it turns out, was based on incorrect numbers for our utility poles. It was based on an estimate of 1,253 utility poles versus the 1,783 that we actually have. We actually have 530 more utility poles than that estimate was based on. So we have a really special risk in Charlemont, which is we don't know if that not to exceed budget is right. We've already done the borrowing authorization, and so now it's really critical that we validate whether or not we're going to be on budget for construction. And as near as we can tell, the only way we can do that is to get a complete and thorough design so we know what we're going to actually spend for construction.
You did.
So our key request is that we would like you to release the professional services money in the form of a grant to Charlemont so we can get that design done, see where we stand on construction, and do that through Westfield Gas and Electric and look at moving forward down that path. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you very much. And you be sure, if you have written comments, to make sure they are available to us. Okay, alrighty. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Christine?
So, Plainfield?
Howard Bronstein, I'm chairman of the Plainfield Board of Selectmen. We need affordable broadband. People have come out in town in record numbers to support it. It affects our ability to retain and attract business and residents. It contributes to a spiral of low income, declining population, limited tax base, and isolation. We can't wait to build our network. We've endured a constant state of flux in MBI policies, procedures, and personnel. Throughout, we've maintained a laser focus on our town objectives. We seek to build a town-owned broadband network that will provide universal and affordable fiber optic broadband service by 2018. We want to control the project so that we can enable regional collaboration in the future. Our goal is to ensure access for every home and business, hire reputable companies, preferably owned or based in Western Massachusetts, and be able to control the project costs, while we can also collaborate with neighboring towns to ensure sustainability. Up to today, we've completed the MBI readiness process. We've received the green light from the Division of Local Services. We plan to work with MBI on our network design and construction. We've also been closely monitoring the private partner RFP. The RFP yielded just one response that'll meet Plainfield's goals: Westfield Gas and Electric's Whip City Fiber proposal. We're pursuing conversations, and I hope later today. Their MLP structure focuses on ratepayers rather than shareholders. They've done business in Western Mass, and their RFP provides clear and complete services and pricing. We feel like in Plainfield we have two options. One of them is the MBI assist track with pre-construction to development of a construction bid, or work directly with Westfield Gas and Electric through all phases of pre-construction, bidding, and potentially operations. We applaud MBI's recent flexibility approach to ensure community control and decision-making. The pursuit of flexibility, however, has resulted in delay, instability, uncertainty. We need the following actions in order to be successful. We need the commitment of the $650,000 in broadband funds in Plainfield to match our $1.13 million in town funds. We need the now obsolete division of that money into two pools to just be that one pool of $650,000. We need to require all of the assets of MBI in the middle mile network be available to reduce the cost of last mile deployment and operations. We need MBI to continue to play a role in advocacy and resource generation to solve our region's digital divide. Thanks. How'd I do?
You did pretty good. Thank you very much, George. Thank you.
Is Karen in? Anybody for Karen in? Charlie, Worthington, you're on.
Thanks. Charlie Rose, I'm a select board member here in Worthington. I chair of our broadband committee and also representative and vice chair to WiredWest. So we're kind of in descending order there of importance. We're kind of a cautious group here in Worthington. We have not yet passed the borrowing of the, and so we have gone as far as we can in the readiness process, and we're essentially stalled. And the reason we're stalled is because essentially we don't have a clear path. And for people in Worthington to vote to borrow, close to $2 million, they want to know the path. So I'd like to address a couple of things. First, kind of another looming change in MBI policy. Recent statements from Peter and Ed to the towns and to the press have indicated that because the RFP responses for design and engineering came in high, that you're going to be telling towns to manage their own construction contracts. In your recent letter, Peter, you said the responses to the design and engineering RFP for 40 towns came in well over projected budgets.
Charlie, we're going to have a future response to all the MBI assisted build issues.
Okay.
Okay.
So then moving on to the provider, the private provider RFP results. Like everyone else, we sat anxiously waiting to see if anything was going to come, but didn't honestly expect anything. And we were pretty much rewarded that way. The only responses that addressed Worthington at all were the ones from Crocker Communications and Westfield Gas and Electric. We found that the Crocker proposal seemed to be pretty much a non-starter for us. I'm not sure how other towns are reacting. Essentially, if you add up what they're asking subscribers to pay for that service, it amounts to what the town would pay to build it. So it didn't seem to make a lot of sense. The one bright light, as you've already heard, was probably Westfield Gas and Electric. The response shows that we can design, engineer, and build and run a network within original cost estimates that MBI originally produced. And further, we know, and we've known for years, that it's more cost effective and efficient for as many of us as possible to work together. There are economies of scale And regional negotiations with Westfield and others are yielding those kinds of positive results. My town, other towns across this region have been working together to try to resolve the problem individually and regionally. I'm completely dumbfounded by the lack of interest in working with an organization that represents the majority of the towns that are affected. There hasn't been a discussion between WiredWest and MBI or any other organized regional group that I'm aware of since the restart last spring. I think that's kind of sad. This is the first public hearing I'm aware of that ever has taken place where you were actively solicited input from towns, and that predates, you guys being involved. Time? So can I just go real quick through some asks? We'd like to make provisions for meaningful representation of the towns in the process. We'd like to see clear acknowledgement that regionalization is acknowledgement of regionalization by meeting with groups that are actively working in that regard, including WiredWest. Acknowledge the fact that some towns can't proceed without knowing they have a sustainable operating plan once they built their network, and that if a town has decided their way forward is through a regional operation plan, that they can be told and guaranteed they'll get their grant from MBI if that's the path they've chosen. So, thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. And Charlie, you're going to have that prepared and sent to us, right?
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
Plus a little more.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We really do. I'm joined by Ed Donnelly, Deputy Director. I'm sorry I didn't introduce him before. You left the same time, Ed.
I drive more carefully.
Well, I know my way around the Berkshires.
We're a little ahead of time. Is Goshen in the house?
Wayne Glauser, Select Board Goshen, and on the High-Speed Internet Committee. So responding to the various responses for the RFP, I would characterize Charter, Comcast, and Fiber Connect as cherry-picked proposals number 1, 2, and 3, which don't advance the agenda of expanding connections for high-speed internet throughout the region. Also, they all want to own the network, which is problematic, and they basically are hybrid fiber coax technology, which means that they're fiber on the utility poles, copper to the homes. Not a great way to go forward. Okay? Skipping over that, Mid-Hudson, no comment, various extremely limited proposal to address a specific issue in one town. Crocker Communications, local regionally privately held company, has an interesting proposal, but a problematic way to finance it based on putting some of the cost on the individuals as opposed to the town. If a town wants to do that, I guess that's fine. It depends on how you look at it, but it is an all-fiber network. I would concur with some of the other people here that Westfield Gas and Electric, Whip City Fiber, has far and away the best proposal that I've seen through this RFP process. Local utility company, sound technology, sustainable, practical upgrade paths based on the technology that they have. It's an existing MLP structure, which could be useful. Would offer service to any of the towns, just like the Crocker proposal, and it's a well thought out proposal, and it recommends town ownership and control of the network. I want to mention the WiredWest proposal as well, which we're not part of this response, but it's an MLP to MLP structure, which works very well if they chose Westfield Gas and Electric, because I know they're in the process of looking at that as well. And it provides a path forward for towns to cooperate and make the best use of cost and fund control through negotiation. I'd like to say, though, that the three technical reps that represent MBI out here, Cornell, John, and Todd, I don't know if they're here, have been doing a very good job. So I'd like to compliment them. I'd also like to say that the remainder of MBI and the state apparatus with which MBI functions in has been abysmally slow, out of touch, and shows little regard for how to deal with the town's needs and preferences. I don't see that has changed to date, and I encourage both of you to effect that type of change. The towns also need to be guaranteed that MBI or the state will not give away any town's share of either the construction or professional services allocations to other towns and that each town can be guaranteed those allocation monies. It would be even better if the state were more realistic and increased the allocations that make the financing so burdensome for the towns. One more sentence. The towns are all stronger, safer, better capitalized, and better able to negotiate if we work together as towns, not separately. And I would appreciate it if Peter and Ed at this meeting would acknowledge that the WiredWest structure is an option for the state.
Thank you.
Okay?
All right, thank you. Thank you for your comments, Wayne, and also that's why we brought the providers here to come here, talk about their technology differentials and the like. Be very interesting in that regard.
Thank you to Peter Larkin and MBI for hosting this event. This is a very welcome opportunity for us to be heard, and it is the beginning of real collaboration. The Westfield Gas and Electric proposal to design, engineer, and manage the build at a fraction of the costs that MBI has estimated excuse me, is a good one. We have a solution here for municipally owned broadband. WG&E is already an MLP, knows the MLP rules, is local, and has a great deal of experience. With WG&E managing the build, we can own our networks and have them regionally managed by our WiredWest cooperative, so towns won't have the burden of individually managing them. Please remember that WiredWest consists of the towns themselves. It is not an outside entity. A private monopoly owning our networks would not operate in our best interest. Is this okay?
You're fine.
Okay.
You're fine.
Thank you. Private companies are responsible to their investors, not to the people to whom they provide a service. We know what we are capable of, what will suit us best. We want to own the network, and we are willing and able to take this responsibility. Local officials are thoroughly conversant with all the municipal laws regarding finance, procurement, and open meetings. We know what we need, we know how to do it. We should be the decision makers where our money and our future are concerned. We have to live with the consequences of this project. Thank you for understanding this.
Thank you, Madam.
Beckett, Jeremy?
I'm Jeremy Dunn from Beckett. Please excuse me, I've been very ill, so I'm quite hoarse.
Oh, okay.
Thank you both, and for everyone for executing the Private Provider RFP. I think it's been very helpful in several ways. One is obviously for some towns, and we haven't heard from those towns yet, there are some cable providers that may be of interest to them. But I think that for most of the towns, and the ones we've heard from so far, including Beckett, it's obvious that there's no firms that are willing to invest in our towns. And we knew that, and it's great to see that affirmed, actually. Beckett, like other towns, is extremely interested in the Westfield proposal. We think it's very pragmatic. Ed mentioned in the meeting that we were here in Worthington a few weeks ago that the design and engineering responses had come back last fall over budget. It's clear that Westfield's design and engineering responses are well within budget. We've calculated those numbers for each of the towns, and they fall well within, as well as the construction supervision numbers. I seem to recall hearing from, I think it might have been you, Ed, that there was some consideration about going out for yet another round of RFPs. I would encourage you to please not do that. There's nobody else that's going to come and rescue us. We need to make do with the responses that we've gotten so far, and we have some very good options on the table. We have a series of requests. One of the requests echoes the request that some other towns have made, is to please either spend the money or release it, and not just continue sitting on it. It's been years. I personally have been involved in this project only for 2.5 years, but that funding has been available for those 2.5 years. It's time to start spending that money. We have a provider now in the form of Westfield who's offered to give us the services we need within the budget that we have. Please either spend the money or just give it to us so that we can spend it. My second request is to please stop opposing regionalization. I wrote more details in my letter to you, in my written testimony. But Peter, your letter of January made very clear your objection to regionalization, and I'd like to ask you to withdraw that, and I'd like to ask the MBI to come out on record as supporting towns that wish to regionalize. It's within what the governor has asked the towns to do. It's within what the legislature has asked the towns to do in terms of the Municipal Modernization Act. It's within what the towns themselves have decided that they want to do. Beckett passed a select board resolution saying that they wish to realize, and it's pragmatic, and it's what we do all the time anyway. We have all these school districts that are regionalized. And there's certain types of things, like schools and like big expensive broadband networks, which really only work on a regional basis. And we would like you to recognize that and stop opposing us, please. And the last request has to do with the process. Somebody else, or maybe two of the other speakers, acknowledged that this is the first opportunity we've had for public comment. I would like to encourage you to do more of this. And in particular, if you have objections to what's said today, and you may well have objections, please don't sit in your offices, wherever you have your offices, and write up a new policy which you then impose upon us. Please engage us in a constructive discussion of those policies. Please don't do what the MBI has done in the past, and I'm not blaming you for this because you weren't present at the time, but they've come up with legalistic reasons why all of our proposals don't work. Please come up with legalistic reasons why they could work, using your lawyers and your staff to help us move forward, rather than to oppose us. Thank you. That was pretty good.
Thank you.
Is Middleton up here?
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for making this opportunity available to us. I'm on the Select Board in Middlefield, Massachusetts, and I'm one of the two members of the Select Board who have been recently elected by special elections in order to fill in and do the town's business. I had not been involved to any great extent with the previous workings of the Select Board. However, Middlefield is one of the unique towns in the area that has already elected to go with a wireless broadband service for our town, and we have been given a grant. Some of the things that are obstructing us, and I refer to it as essentially noise, and this last private provider RFP was one of them. That set us back at least 3 to 4 months in moving forward with our project, because now there was another option on the table, which essentially proved not to be an option for Middlefield in the short run or long run, with the exception of working with Whip City Fiber. The chair of the Select Board asked me to read his statement, or it's a mutual statement. We wish to voice our dismay.
Could you give me the name of the chair and yours as
Sure.
well?
I'm sorry, my name is Dennis Bassick, Select Board member. David DiNicola is the chair of the Middlefield Select Board, and the third member is Judith Hogue.
Okay, thank you.
We wish to voice and essentially what it boils down to is one of the obstacles we're having is the full funding of our program. The town has already essentially decided that going with fiber and taking a loan is not possible for our small town. We're roughly 511 people. We wish to voice our dismay over $275,000 in professional service funds that MBI is not releasing to Middlefield for construction of its last mile broadband project. MBI's RFP invites private providers to list the additional amount of funding requested by the respondent beyond each town's construction allocation to provide 96% coverage. Yet the MBI insists on withholding $18 million collectively from municipal-owned networks. This is a big financial burden on our towns. Western Massachusetts has been subsidizing construction costs for projects in the eastern part of the state for years. It is high time the state fully funds high-speed internet, as most towns cannot afford to impose further tax increases on their residents. Some cutbacks for school fundings have already cost our towns thousands of dollars. By not paying the full amount of our last mile broadband allocation, MBI only adds to town's financial shortfalls. And as always, it usually just boils down to the money. We would really appreciate having the professional and engineering services money released to the towns so that we can continue on with the process of building our own municipally owned broadband network. Thank you.
Thank you.
John Sears, Town of Holly.
I'm not John Sears. I'm Lark Twing, Chair of the Finance Committee in Holly and a member of the Broadband Committee. Been actively involved in this whole process for 3 or 4 years now. I don't know how long it's been. Those who may know, Holly is probably the second smallest of the towns that are unserved. We have about 330 population. Of that, we have probably 150 homes that are actually lived in year-round. And of those, we have probably about 80 people who are interested and could afford broadband. The other half of the town couldn't afford it under any circumstances, even if it cost them nothing to build it. The town has already decided that the taxpayers are not going to contribute anything. It's going to be the users who need to pay for it. We would dearly love to have fiber, but it is not even in our dreams anymore. We do have a potential wireless solution, although as we experience what Middlefield has gone through, we've determined that the amount of construction funds that Holly would be allocated is little more than about 60%, which would put about 140,000 on the 84 or so subscribers. Whereas if we could get access to all of our funds and be able to design, build, and have someone operate a wireless system for us, we could do it, we believe, with the 520,000. Even then, because we are such a small community, we would be facing somewhere between $100 and $120 a month in operating costs. So we really like the Cracker proposal. There are members of our community who would pay that additional fee. Don't know whether there's 84 of them, but we're not going to get there any other way if we don't get access to all of our money, and even if we do, we're still going to have very limited choices. So we please encourage you to make the assets available, particularly for those communities that are doing the work themselves. Thank you.
Thank you.
Town of Keith, over here. Barrington. And Ashfield.
Mr. Larkin, my name is David Culp. I moved to Ashfield in 2007, and almost since I arrived, I've been involved in broadband activism. I've easily volunteered over 1,000 hours towards this problem. As an assistant professor in computer science at UMass Amherst and a consultant of the biotechnology industry, I was keenly aware of my personal need for good internet connectivity, but at the time I was so enamored with the rural countryside that I thought that satellite internet would be an acceptable short-term solution and that better internet was just around the corner. If I had known 10 years ago that today I would still be facing such a serious technical challenge from my professional work and that my children, now teenagers, would still be unable to adequately use the internet, I probably would not have moved to Ashfield. Indeed, few young people are choosing to remain in, much less relocate to, our small towns without broadband. Studies have shown a significant demographic shift in the hill towns towards an aging population with fewer families with children. This shift has major negative implications towards the long-term health and well-being of our towns. Each year without progress is another year of decline that may be irreversible. I continue to hope that the state will demonstrate the necessary vision, leadership, and funding to turn the tide, and I'm looking to you to ensure that happens. Today, we are reviewing the Private Provider RFP. It's noteworthy that no qualified applicant included Ashfield, even though Ashfield is probably one of the healthier towns among our peers. What does this tell you about private industry and the state's broadband funding? For me, it demonstrates what we already knew 10 years ago. The major telecoms have little interest in our rural towns. I note that for the handful of towns that Comcast offered to cherry pick, it requested almost 3 times the subsidy that the state offered. So your RFP also shows clearly that the state has woefully underfunded broadband. So what to do? Well, one of the respondents to your RFP stands out as worthy of further consideration. This is Westfield Gas and Electric. This respondent is a local MLP offering an intermunicipal service agreement to construct a fiber-to-the-home network in any of the unserved towns. You can see in their proposal that the total estimated cost of professional services, including design and project management, is far less than the amount originally allocated to each town. Put another way, given the combination of construction and professional services allocations, a fiber-to-the-home network could likely be built in each town with the $40 million allocated by the state and the amounts approved for borrowing by most of the towns. But where's the rub? It's in this so-called professional services. In January 2015, when the MBI board approved construction and professional services allocations for each town, those calculations were based on a plan for the MBI to construct a regional fiber-to-the-home network. At the time, we all understood that the professional services component would only be available to towns that chose to participate in the regional network. That was an important incentive, long before your time, to promote efficiencies and cost savings through regionalization and a single unified build plan coordinated by MBI. But as you said here on January 27th, that original plan, along with the Cartesian estimates, is an historic artifact. So what exactly is the justification for withholding professional services money at this point in time? And why must these funds be provided only as in-kind services? As was reported in the news recently, MBI is developing a revised last-mile policy in which the towns take on the responsibility of directly hiring a construction contractor. MBI would provide the towns with a bid packet representing best practices which towns could use to issue an RFP. In addition, I understand that MBI intends to hire a design and engineering firm on behalf of the towns to produce a design, assist and make ready, etc., all funded through professional services. To me, the real solution seems clear and simple. Instead of hiring this D&E vendor on behalf of the town, why not simply provide the towns with 2 additional bid packets for design and engineering and project management? MBI then provides professional services funding as grant money to the towns to directly hire these firms, just as you are already recommending that we do for construction. I'm almost done. After all, as you've said many times, one size does not fit all. MBI should focus on providing towns with guidance, including industry standards and best practices for procurement and network construction. MBI should simply serve then as a granting agency, allowing towns to submit funding requests as individual towns or consortia. I understand that New York State is a fine example of just such a granting organization with no role as a middleman gumming up the works. After 9 years, it's time that MBI acknowledges its failure, drops its paternalistic approach, and simply grants money to the towns to get the job done. Let's call a spade a spade. Professional services is a fiction, and it's time for the state to drop the ruse. You are not responsible for perpetuating an inefficient state bureaucracy. Your job is to ensure that state money is directed in the most efficient manner to solve the last mile problem. So I urge you to do the right thing. Demonstrate full transparency and make all state funds available as direct grants to the town.
Do we have any other representatives here from another town?
Nobody else signed up, except for me.
Okay, so we have what? Shutesbury, let's go. Thank you. Thank you. How are you?
Hi. My name is Gail Huntress, and I'm from the Shutesbury Broadband Committee. I'm speaking on behalf of our Broadband Committee and our Select Board. I'm glad that this is happening today because, as many other people have mentioned, it's one of our first opportunities to publicly talk about what's been happening. And I guess what I want to do is I'm deciding whether or not I should read my prepared statement or not. I want to talk about how much time our town has put into this. Collectively, our Broadband Committee and our volunteers have logged over 3,700 hours in the last 3 years trying to solve this problem. We have extensively studied and understand the technical issues as well as the financial challenges and risks of a project of this type. In addition to our town leadership and committee, our townspeople overwhelmingly support this. In 2015, in historic attendance records at our vote, 97% in favor of borrowing $1.7 million. We're highly motivated and want to see progress made as soon as possible. So I can speak from a unique position because Shutesbury is very attractive. It's one of the most densely populated towns, and we are one of the only towns that received a proposal from both Comcast and Charter. At this point, where those RFPs stands, we actually are not very interested in them. A couple of reasons for that. They lack 100% coverage. They do cover 96% of the town, but when we hear that, we hear that 4% or around 40 households will simply be left out. The severability issue is a difficult one where our choice is linked to the choices of other towns, and it lacks an all-fiber build. The proposed hybrid fiber cable solution has limited capacity and isn't future-proof. The timing is also difficult because of the contingencies of the RFP, along with the necessity of a cable licensing agreement, mean that our build, if we go with Charter or Comcast, would be delayed for another number of years. And finally, control. You've heard a lot about control from a number of people, and we have the opportunity here to invest in our own telecommunications future and maintain control in such a way to act in our townspeople's best interest. We cannot depend on this from a private company. Their bottom line is profits, as it should be. They're private companies, and we are seeing this as a public utility problem. The one bright spot in the RFP, as many people have mentioned, is the Westfield Gas and Electric proposal. And to that, I have 3 asks. 1, grant the full professional services allocation directly to Shutesbury, along with a construction grant, so we can engage Westfield Gas and Electric to start the build process. 2, allow towns to show ongoing sustainability by using a regional operations model, such as provided by WiredWest. Shutesbury could run its own network. We know we could, just like Leverett does, our neighbor. But we find the reduction in management hassles, along with the low monthly subscription costs, are benefits that offset the subsidies we'll be providing to the smaller towns. Our monthly subscriber fees can be within a few dollars of what it would cost to run our own network. And this fractional cost is well worth the benefits gained by utilizing a regional operations solution. The final ask is to remove the requirement for each town to connect and utilize the middle mile. This offers high potential savings, and the revised policy should specifically state that each town only needs to connect to the middle mile when technically necessary, and not at all if there are other better economic options that exist. This will contribute to network sustainability for all towns. Thank you for inviting us in this process. One of the biggest challenges so far has been a lack of information about what's being done and a lack of input to the decisions that affect us. We would like to work with you to make sure that the solutions and policies being generated are acceptable and in our best interest while they are in progress rather than after the fact. Again, thank you for this opportunity and for working towards our shared goal in bringing broadband to the underserved areas of Massachusetts.
Thank you. Listen, we have one town left to speak to this, which she has a time of 3:30. We're going to take a break for, anyways, at 3 o'clock. And so for that end, I would say this has been very thoughtful in the approach that many of you have brought forward. These are things that we've heard directly from you through what Bill Ennin, who are community liaison. Frankly, your voice is being heard. And part of this process does involve us having to look at the private sector as a solution. We recognize, obviously, some concerns that have been raised here. There are issues that we have taken on and will continue to take on. We did allude to the fact the last time we spoke about the design engineering RFP came out. It was too expensive. It has been a bit of a pause, but in terms of the design engineering component, but But the work of the MBI did not end, and part of that was to look at the private sector too for solutions. For towns, some towns that aren't even represented here, it does pose a solution. For that, that's to the good. We also believe that there is some benefits in some regionalization. The thought that in the letter that you received in December speaks to the fact that the readiness process has been a great experience for all of us. In other words, it's eyes wide open exercise to look at the financing underpinning all the towns, and now that we're at that stage where we are now, is we're building this program. It really comes down to how do we do it better. I think some of the suggestions here today are things that we're going to come back with in short order. I mean, clearly there's a situation even in the initial monies that were set aside, whether it was the initial MBI funding mechanisms in the Cartesian model, are recognized and artifacts of the past in that regard, and we need to revisit these issues. The buckets themselves symbolize the artifact of the past. There's one pool of money. I do know here that I have Mary Jane Bacon from Senator Rosenberg's office who wants to speak to a little bit of that. We all recognize that in some ways when I first came in here and I saw the commitment required of the towns to come up with 2/3 of the money as it relates to the 1/3 state commitment. When those decisions were made to put the monies on the table had to do more with the proposals that were thought at that time to be appropriate. And so in that regard, we are wrestling with obviously finite resources and obviously the unserved towns come to bear. I would give the floor to Mary Jane Bacon if she would like to speak a little bit to Senator Rosenberg's position in that regard, who's asked to have you to say a few words in that regard. I'll also make known that this is an issue, as you all know, is important and paramount to your concerns. This is resonating in the governor's office as a priority of his as well. And Senator Rosenberg in his office has been stalwart, as his Representative Kulik, who represents this community. I mean, those are powerful voices that we hear from and are great supporters of your efforts here. Mary Jane?
And that's what I wanted to say, and I'm kind of glad that the Heats finally coming up. Senator Rosenberg wanted you to know that he does have the opportunity. He meets weekly with the governor, with the Speaker of the House, with the Lieutenant Governor, and on many, if not most, if not all of those weeks, he brings up the progress being made on broadband. And he's heard from a lot of people, and your representatives have heard and shared information with each other. The people are frustrated that they got a little scared that progress may actually be impeded or maybe slowing down. And we're coming into a construction season. I think people are really excited to continue making progress. Those people who've gotten into poll surveys are real happy that they got that work done, but they're wondering what happens next. And the senator's very much concerned, and the governor's very much concerned that people don't, lose heart and that the project doesn't lose its momentum. And so they're prepared to, stick with this. I think they've both made a commitment to you guys, to see this through, and they'll do what it takes to get you there. I think there's some complicated questions that people have to work through to find answers, to work for everybody. And so your feedback here has been really, really helpful. But he wanted you to know that don't panic. They're going to be there with you for the long haul here. Hopefully it's not going to be too much longer.
Thank you, Mary Jane. So with that, I'd like to take a little bit of a break and come back again with obviously when comes in as well. Thank you. And you've got the providers here to ask the questions and kick the tires and speak to the technology. Thank you.